If revolution was a movie, I'd be theme music. Time to ignite what I spit is lighter fluid. Stepping into it, fixed rays, such a glorious design. Marching into the biggest fight of our lives. Time to spoil the
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, welcome to the BLKFLA experience. We are the cultural archive for the Black political movement in the state of Florida, where our purpose is to help you reimagine a Florida where Black people are able to live in freedom, equity, and authenticity. I'm your host, Jamal Still, and we are taking this time to dive into all things Black politics and Black culture. So once again, let's get into it. I have the distinct honor of my second guest ever. Like, I only did 2 episodes, so this is it. My second guest ever being the former state House representative, the 2018 Democratic nominee for State Attorney General, and the current candidate for Hillsborough County Commission District 6, and the host of Vanguards of Democracy. It's right in the back, ladies and gentlemen. It's right in the back. Y'all give it up for Mr. Leander Shaw. He is here with us on today.
Thank you, brother. I'm happy to be here. We've been trying to get this together. I've been excited about it. I'm excited about your delving into this and even starting this because it's needed, it's necessary, and I'm happy to be here, man. I'm happy to be here and happy to be here with you.
Absolutely, and I'm happy for you to actually be here with us on today. So let's hop right into it. Let's jump right into it. Of course. Before we do, I want to thank each and every person who has taken the time and opportunity within the last 2 weeks to listen to our inaugural episode for BLKFLA, where our first guest ever was the incomparable and the amazing state rep Angie Nixon. Joined us for some awesome conversation, and we've gotten some great feedback and some great word and some great numbers actually for us just being a startup podcast. So thanks to everyone for tuning in to our podcast on the wonderful and awesome MPN Network. So let's get into it on today. Of course, everyone knows our very first segment is the What We Talm Bout segment. So, what we talking about on today? I had the honor of having a conversation with an individual who goes by the name of Jake. Jake is a Jamaican. Jake works as an employee for Hertz car rental company. I was dropping my rental car off today after coming from Orlando for, my daytime job, which is the statewide organizing manager for Black Voters Matter. We were there yesterday doing an awesome and wonderful work at the Orlando Music Fest. And so driving my rental car off, and Jake asked me this question, and I feel like it's a great topic for us to get into. So the question that Jake asked me was, in 2020, we went through this pandemic and we all had the visuals on our screen, body bags, people dying, lack of jobs still in the midst of a pandemic, but people being looked at as essential workers. And we had a current president at the time who was not listening to his administration, was not listening to his cabinet, and a situation that could have really been prevented escalated to where millions and millions of individuals were dying. Meanwhile, we have a new president within this administration for the last 4 years. And these are Jake's words, not mine. For the last 4 years, yes, things have gotten expensive, but if you have a job, you're able to afford some of the things that you want. We actually have a great booming employment opportunities within the country, things of that nature. So the question that Jake asked was, why is it that current polls are showing that the last person that was in office before 2020, pandemic, all the things, the last person that was in office is currently leading in polls. And the current administration is taking a hit because everybody seems to be gravitating to the last president and the last president and the last administration, while we are dealing with a situation of having to remember everything that happened in 2020 while this person was the president of the United States. I have my take on it, and I'm gonna share what my take was that I gave Jake. But I actually want to throw that question to you. Mr. Shaw. What is it? Why is this seem to be that, especially people within our community, is starting to feed into the rhetoric and starting to feed into the thing of, yo, I like President Trump a little bit more than I like President Biden. I might go back in November and vote for President Trump. So what's your perspective on why are we being fed the hypothetical Kool-Aid, if you will, and buying into this particular situation?
Well, I think there's a couple questions there. So there's a couple answers. You know, when I go to the barbershop, I am really disappointed in the conversation as it relates to this topic. There's a lot of pro-Trump stuff, a lot of anti-Biden stuff, a lot of anti-politicians, period. But there's way more openness to Trump than I think there should be in a Black barbershop. And it relates to, one, people have short memories. Two, Trump's name was on those COVID checks. Three, Black men love this macho Trump stuff. And it's a problem. But that I can feel it. I can hear it. That's essentially what they're saying. And, you know, it takes a lot of time. You got to remind people about Charlottesville. You got to remind people about January 6th. You got to remind people about, he's talking about shithole country. You got to remind people of all this because it's just out of their mind. And they're only thinking about like the last couple months, and it's Trump v. Biden. Biden's old. Trump is a little less old. And why not just go with Trump if they're both, you know, old politicians? And there's still a lot of I don't know to this. I don't know why the economy's doing so good and Biden's not getting credit for it. I don't know why he's, you know, lowered the prescription price of these drugs, and the economy and the jobs and all the indicators of the economy are great, and he's not getting any credit for it. I don't know why that is, other than I think we're just in a place in this country where policies don't matter. It is what it is. And I don't care. If you like Trump, nothing Biden can do is going to change that. And if you don't like Trump, nothing Trump can do can change that. And so it doesn't matter what the price of eggs are. It doesn't matter what happens. And it doesn't matter. You either hate or you like these guys. So it's really interesting. Biden is going to just have to convince young people and independents. That's who he has to convince. He's not going to convince MAGA Republicans because they're just going to do what they're going to do. But Biden has to convince young people of our party, particularly young Black men, and he's got to convince independents that, look, Trump, do you guys remember what was happening in 2020 when he was the president? It was a chaos. It was awful. He got impeached twice. He's on trial now for all these things. He's like a convicted sexual assaulter. Like there's all these things going on, but Trump just plays the victim, and it's just the Democrats doing this. And if you're a MAGA Republican, you're not going to believe anything bad about Trump. And it's really shocking, but I think we're beyond Republicans and Democrats looking at each other and maybe disagreeing about policy. I just think whatever y'all do, I hate. Whatever we do, you hate. And here we are. And
so with that, I think touch on the 3 points that I gave Jake while I was at the airport, and within each point, we can have a quick discussion around those points. So the first point that I gave him was, I think mainstream media is in this space where we don't want to acknowledge the existence of COVID still being a real thing. I have to acknowledge it because currently I have a 17, 18-year-old nephew that's sitting in the hospital right now because he has COVID. Now it's not as severe as 2020 and those things, but it's a thing, and he's like really in the hospital, you know, going through it. And so I think mainstream media has had this thing of not wanting to acknowledge that COVID is still in the space. And so because of that, I feel like Trump and his campaign team and all of the people within the GOP can ignore what happened in 2020. Right. I feel like we shouldn't, whether it's individuals who tout the Democratic Party strong, whether it's us as organizers on the streets organizing around this from a C3 or a C4 perspective, I feel like we can't dismiss that this is still a theme that people are still dealing with in this country, and looking at this from the perspective of this podcast in this state, in the state of Florida. The second piece that second point that I brought to him was, during that time of the pandemic, we were presented the situation of the fact that the American dream, if you will, is just that, a dream and a fairy tale. And I will explain my perspective. We were introduced with the fact that corporations and businesses made record profits.
Yeah.
During 2020. Supermarkets made record profits in 2020. So the thing that we were always taught is that record profits mean a decrease in prices for things that you have to go buy, or an increase in wages for workers or employees. Mm-hmm. And the issue becomes, profits go up, but amazingly, wages do not, or prices for things that we have to buy increase. And now people have gotten smart to the space of, well, why are we still going to buy into the situation of work hard, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, things of that nature, if profits have went up, but the national minimum wage is still at the same place that it was at almost nearly 15, 20 years ago.
No, Jamal, it's my belief that corporate greed is the problem in this country more than anything else.
Exactly.
So it doesn't matter who's in charge, Democrats or Republicans. It doesn't matter who the president is, Democrat or Republican. What's going to happen, no matter who's in charge, is that rich people going to do well, and corporations are going to do well, and people at the very top are going to make a lot of money. I don't care if we're at war. I don't care if there's a pandemic. I don't care if hurricanes and earthquakes and fire, no matter what, people at the top and corporations are going to do well and succeed. And that's a problem in this country because both parties are to blame for that. Because again, doesn't matter who's in charge. Those folks do well. And your example is the best one. In the middle of a pandemic, record profits. It also showed we didn't all need to be working 9 to 5, did we? It also showed we all didn't need to be coming into the office every day, didn't it? It showed all these things about working in corporate America, and it laid bare, I think, like you said, the kind of the fragility of the American dream. And I think the biggest problem in this country is class and corporate greed. I think that's what drives racism. I think that's what drives all this stuff is class and greed.
And the very thing that you're saying is the thing that I stated to him as we were at the airport. My thing was, so people have gotten to this space where they're like, why am I going to work a 9 to 5 when I can get in my car and drive Uber or Lyft and make the same amount of money, if not more, than working a 9 to 5 and not get taxed for this, because most Uber and Lyft drivers are 1099. And so the third piece, which is an important piece and something that both you and I have had a discussion around as well, is the Biden administration, and more so the Democratic Party, have not really bragged as much as I feel that they should about the things that have happened since we've put this person in office as president. We've given you the numbers in the Senate. We've given you the numbers in the House up until the midterms. We had all the pieces of the executive branch. And when we had all the pieces of the executive branch, this is what happened. Even when the GOP took the majority in the House, but we still have the majority in the Senate, this is what happened. And I feel that even if Trump is lying, because he's been called out time and time again on a lot of his lies, even if Trump is lying, even if the GOP is also presenting falsehoods and giving us the red herrings, if you will, to ignore the issues that are really going on. Let's think about this from a statewide perspective. We want to continue to focus on anti-DEI legislation, anti-CRT legislation, anti-LGBTQ legislation, while ignoring the fact that we are the most expensive state to live in in this country. Even with all of that, they seem to have the messaging to their base down pat.
Their base is not diverse, number one. So that's easier. Our base is extremely diverse and extremely problematic and extremely loud and we have a different, I'll give you that our messaging is a problem. I'll give you that. I will, that is something that we agree on. But what I will say, and the Democrats kind of favor is so you got a message to Black folks, gay folks, immigrants, white liberals, but like you got a whole bunch of like Palestinians in Minnesota, like you got a whole bunch of people to message to, and that's a hard thing to do. You can just tell the Republican base, the reason you're not doing well is because of people of color and gay people grooming your kids. And boom, you got them. And if you do that, you can fleece them with insurance rates and utility rates and rent because they're so busy being mad at drag queens grooming their kids in Orlando, or Black people and DEI, or all these people running across the board. If you have them mad at cultural stuff and this woke and, CRT, if you got them all jazzed up about that, then they will forget that for the last 20 years, Florida's paid the highest property insurance rates in the country. So guess who hasn't been in charge? Us. So, but it doesn't, they are very good, Jamal. That's Trumpism. Mm-hmm. That is exactly what Trump is. He's given kind of the white MAGA people this grievance that you'd be doing way better if it wasn't for Black folks shoving affirmative action down your throat. And you'd be doing so much better if all these Mexicans weren't coming across the border with fentanyl and raping your women. And you'd be like that. He has people believing that. And so that's why you see all these Confederate flags and Nazi flags and all these people saying out loud what they used to at least say in coded language, because he's got them. It's the politics of grievance. I'm mad at somebody. And I'm mad that I'm not doing well. There's probably that person over there that's different than me.
Absolutely.
And that's an easy message to sell. That's the problem.
So to the point in knowing that there is a diverse group of individuals that the Democratic Party has to message to, what would be a proper working class message to give essentially to our base? What would be a proper working class message to give to that diverse group to tie in the federal victories that have happened under the Biden administration, tie it in and drive it home to the people within the state of Florida for them to essentially turn out in August for the state primaries, as well as in November for the general?
You said it. It's a working class economy-based message. It is a message based on, how well the economy is doing, what it wasn't doing before. Inflation, if you're even mad at inflation, it's because Trump was giving out all this free money, and it led to inflation. And I mean, the economy and the jobs and every metric that you measure economic success by, Biden is absolutely crushing it. Not just he's doing, like, the economy's roaring. Not everyone's feeling it. I get it. And some people, but talk about those numbers, talk about the drug prices, talk about these things, Medicaid and all these things he's doing. I would talk about the economy. That is what I would be concentrating on, because and listen, we're Black men. So I know all I want to talk about is why y'all doing this anti-DEI stuff and why CRT. I want to talk about that all the time. Mm-hmm. But if I do that, I'm falling into their trap of talking about only that, when that's not what gets our people out, and that's not what gets into it. Is the economy and how America's doing to working class and middle class folks. And sometimes I think Democrats, because we're trying to please a lot of people in the base, I guess, we play defense on the field that they want to play on. Mm-hmm. They will talk about woke, CRT, anti-DEI all day long, because that's what they want to talk about.
And drive it until it's blue in the face.
But we need to pivot to the economy. Like, we can't get sucked into this, kind of defense. Because I got this podcast, and for a couple weeks, all I did was talk about this, and I realized, damn, they got me. They got me, and I'm mad, and all I'm doing is talking about this, and I realized I'm exactly falling for the okie doke that I kind of warned people about. And so I kind of stopped, and I told my audience why I stopped. Mm-hmm. But we just have to pivot. You obviously have to defend your coalition partners, and you got to make sure it's bad what they're doing. Yes, but you have to pivot because, Jamal, nothing has changed if we don't win elections.
Right.
Now, we can bitch and moan and all that. We can do all that we want to. If we're not winning elections, as we're not in Florida, it's going to continue to happen. We have to win elections. Then we can fight amongst ourselves about, I think, what we going to do and how we going to do it, and who comes first in the chase to. Let's fight about that. But to win elections, we gotta get over ourselves sometimes and do the message.
And my perspective is just the same. In order for us to in order for us to obtain the power for, with this being BLKFLA, before we're more Black centered than anything. So in order for us to obtain the power that Black constituents need in the state of Florida, the candidates that care about our issues have to be put in, and then once they're put in, then we can have those internal discussions.
But you got to get them in there, and you have to. And another thing that's happening to Black turnout in Florida in particular is we're getting tired of the political system, and so we're choosing not to participate at all. And that is really scary. I don't care if you want to yell and scream and be mad at this, be mad at that. Tell me all of that after you vote. So after you vote, then you can talk all the shit you want. We can get all mad about whatever. But if you are just, I'm not going to vote anymore because I don't like any of the options and none of them do good stuff for Black folks, and we need to do something different. There is no solution, Jamal, that involves not voting. Not voting doesn't solve one problem at all. Not voting does not do anything to advance us anywhere. If you vote for someone and they're not doing what you want them to do, vote for someone else. But you don't just abstain and go home and say, well, I don't want to vote anymore. That's just not how the system is set up. That is not how we move forward. All the gains we have gotten are because of folks we elected who then appointed justices or who signed the civil rights. Like, all that is elected. That's not just for people that they felt good, so they stopped kicking Black folks in the ass. That is because, people got on the United States Supreme Court and Lyndon B. Johnson signed the civil rights. Like, these are all elections happened and people voted. So I try to tell people, look, we can yell and scream and disagree about the how, but you have to vote. You have to participate in the process. So
let's touch on this. So, and this is going to be the last question within the What We Talm Bout segment, and then we'll immediately move into the next segment, which is the interview segment. So in that, one of the things that you touched on is having those barbershop conversations with Black men. I know the conversations that we've had, me and you have come to an agreement that a lot of the deflecting issues, if you will, I'll call them the deflection issues, deflecting from what the real issues are in the state. A lot of the deflection issues are things that Black men do not want to have conversations around. They really don't want to have conversations around the anti-DEI. They really don't want to have conversations around the anti-CRT. Some of it is because they've bought into the rhetoric. So I feel that we just need to have a quick 3 to 5 minute conversation around why the rhetoric is false before we move into the situations that they really want to talk about, which is how am I going to thrive economically in this state? How am I going to be able to better provide for my families in this state? And some, not all, but a good portion are returning citizens. And how am I going to be able to thrive in the skill set, in the trade that I have, if I can't obtain a license for the trade within a certain amount of time? One of the other questions that I have is, we know that this year on the ballot here in the state of Florida, one of the ballot initiatives will be recreational marijuana. So with that, how do you feel? How strongly do you feel the recreational marijuana ballot initiative will play into drawing Black men to vote, as well as what messaging should we tie into dealing with Black men that shows them how strong our economy could be if we get rid of some of these people that are currently within the state legislature?
I think you hit on it. It's kind of the marijuana thing is just kind of freedom, right? It's freedom to kind of live your life how you want to live it. Like, we ain't about all these rules and keeping your weight. Like, we just want you to be able to access it. And the same with the economy. We want to make it easier for you to get a good job and make it easier for you to travel and all those good things. But, one of the scary things that I picked up on in the barbershop, and you learn a lot in the barbershop. Now, I spend a lot of time looking at polls and being on phone calls with people who are very smart and all this stuff. And I still learn at the barbershop. And the thing I learned and picked up on maybe a year or so ago at the barbershop was Democrats used to get the benefit of the doubt on race issues. Like, it used to be, well, I know the Democrats are better for me on race, and so I'm probably leaning that way, but let me at least see what the Republicans are talking about on something else, even though I know they don't like me. That's kind of no longer being the case, because Black men in particular hate everybody. And so if you hate everybody, and if you think both parties are equally bad, that's why you start seeing this willingness to engage with Trump, or this willingness to engage in Republican issues, because they have essentially said, I don't believe either of you are doing good by Black people. Now, whether that's true or not is what we need to push back on. But I started picking up on that vibe in the barbershop, and man, and it was like strong. I mean, they essentially said the politicians like Bloods and Crips. Both of y'all are a gang. I'm just trying to figure out who's gonna help me get the best job.
And that's it. Like, that's literally it. And I think, because speaking from the organization that I work for, speaking from the organizational perspective, I know one of the things that we're going to do here in the state of Florida is have a what I like to call a baby bus. And our baby bus is our 13, 14 passenger vans. So I have a baby bus tour across the state of Florida.
Why you call it the baby bus tour and not what you want to call it?
What do I want to? What do I want?
Oh, you can't call it the short bus tour. That's what I'm saying.
No, we definitely can't, brother. Not at all. But we're gonna do this baby bus tour across the state. But it's gonna be a barbershop tour. Because I do want to touch base with Black men around the issues that are important to them, so that way they'll have an understanding that the issues are the things that you need to go into the polls and vote for, and not the person that is or isn't attached to these issues.
And the only way I was able to peel some of these people off of Trump was because DeSantis was being so anti-Black that I was able to say, there's only one party that doesn't want your history taught in schools, and that ain't mine. There's only one party that doesn't believe diverse. Like, guys, my party ain't perfect, but at least we ain't doing bomb, 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 bomb. And they were like, yeah, that is all Republicans. You're right. Yeah, okay. Yeah. But I can't go to every barbershop and have a 2-hour conversation on all these people. So if we're not there, or someone's not there kind of pushing back, the narrative is Trump gave me this money during the pandemic, and that means he's better on the economy. So I think I'm gonna go Trump.
Not even realizing that the very checks that he put his name on would not have been given to you if not for a majority House.
But I mean, that's a lot of explaining. That's a lot of explaining, and that's why it seems like it that they're better on messaging, because our message is, like, for example, I will end. I know we got to move, but when we got the 2 Senate seats in Georgia, I remember those seats were, if we get those seats, we're going to pass the Voting Rights Act, the John Lewis Act. Well, we didn't pass it. And a lot of Black people that I spoke to were mad about that. That all we did was work to get Ossoff and Warnock elected. We got the majority in the Senate. So what's the problem? And of course, the problem was Manchin, and he didn't want to call it. But that is an unacceptable explanation. Even though it's an accurate explanation as to why you couldn't get the legislation passed, Go to black folks who did all this work for Warnoff and Ossoff on the ground and tell them, well, you know, Manchin doesn't caucus with us on everything, and Sienema had problems with black. No, what they hear is you have broken a promise that you made to us, another promise on black issues. That's what people hear. And they're probably right. But when it's complicated. The point I'm making is we got a complicated case to make, and they don't. Their case is immigrants, black people, and gay people are the problem.
And honestly, you've given us a lot to work with as we go into this election season. And I appreciate you entertaining my time during this particular segment of What We Talm Bout. Now, let's get right into it. Once again, I have the distinct pleasure of interviewing one of my good friends in this movement and just an overall great friend, former state rep, Leander Shaw. So before we start each episode, we have our intro questions. So our intro questions are your top five. And we have two top fives. One top five is, what is your top five music artists?
I was talking about somebody the other day. This is going to show my age, but Outkast, Young Jeezy, Lil Wayne, probably Lionel Richie's on that list, and Biggie.
That's a good list.
Yeah,
I know. That's a great list. That's a great list, and it'll also show my age as well, because Outkast would definitely be at the top of mine. All right, the other top five is top five Black organizers that have been influential for you.
Oh man, I'm gonna list her as an organizer, because she was at one time, but she went on to do a lot of things, and that's State Senator Arthenia Joyner. Maya Brown is someone who has been important in my political career because she's worked on my campaigns, and I know she started there. Fannie Lou helped us all, organizer extraordinaire. Absolutely. I grew up in Tallahassee, and the longtime president of the NAACP in Tallahassee was someone that I had an immense amount of respect for. And that was like when I first moved back to Tallahassee after law school, that was my first getting involved in the NAACP. And that was Dr. Charles Evans. He was a longtime president of the NAACP in Tallahassee. I'm trying to think of some Jacksonville organizers, of course, besides you, brother. But I'm trying to think of some old ones that were around kind of when my dad was coming up. Some names are slipping me, but certainly I'm trying to think of. Give me a minute to think of one. But that's four. Give me a minute on the next one. It'll pop into my head.
No, I got you. So let's hop right into it. In me doing research, that was the first time I learned that you were actually born in Jacksonville.
That's my home. That is. I lived there till I was like 3, Baptist South Hospital. So whenever, I think I saw you for like a city council race or a mayor's race in Jacksonville, and I'd come back, and I happened to be in Jacksonville, and somehow they knew I was there. And I will come back to Jacksonville if it's someone that I like. Tracy Davis will get me to come back to Jacksonville, and I'll do so. I have some connections in Jacksonville. Jacksonville's very good to me when I ran statewide because of those connections from my father and family. So I will come back every now and then to do some political stuff, but it's very rare that I do political stuff in Jacksonville. But that's where I was born.
Yeah, the time that we did see each other, it was for the runoff race that Tracy Poston was having.
Poston, that's right.
For the city council seat.
I remember that.
And so in that you touched on your father, who has the distinct honor and pleasure of being the first Black justice on the Florida State Supreme Court. How influential was that in the path that you decided to take when being a public servant, organizer, and being in the political realm overall?
I mean, it's probably not a surprise that it was immensely influential. When you grow up in a household with Leander Shaw there, it's hard to end up going anywhere else. But I was saying this when we were doing a memorial for him. Everyone's that has a father in the house that's a son, like your father's your hero. Your father is your first superhero. And so that was my first superhero. And it just so happened that he had some pretty big shoes to fill. But, he taught me a lot of things about public service. He essentially taught me that public service is such a noble and valuable calling. And that that is really the most beneficial, fulfilling thing you can do for your people. And so, I went to Princeton University and I went to Ivy League school, and I never was going to be an investment banker. I never was going to stay up in Northeast and, work at some law firm. I was never just going to do the money thing that you do after Ivy League schools. And that is because of my dad. Like, I was always going to come back and use those opportunities to help those that I thought needed help. And I mean, that's just my dad all day long that had that impact on me. And he would always tell me, you have opportunities that I was never able to have. And I became Chief Justice of the Florida Supreme Court. What are you going to do? And so that meant I had to get my stuff together. Right. And so I was always I wanted to be a lawyer forever. That just wasn't anything I even thought about, but I didn't want to be a judge. And it's because I didn't want to follow the law. I wanted to make it, right? So a judge has to kind of do what the law already is and make decisions. And that didn't really interest me. I wanted to get into the making of the law and being a little more active and a little bit more obnoxious than being a judge and following the law. And so that's what kind of drove me into politics. And I'd been around it a long time. After law school at the University of Florida, I went to Tallahassee, and then I did some other things and moved to Tampa. But I always wanted to represent us, because I've always thought we needed the most help, that we got the most problems and we got the most things piled up against us. And so I've always been an advocate of Black people, for Black people, wherever I'm in these rooms. And sometimes I'm the only Black person in a lot of these rooms. I know my dad and the stories he told of coming up and being the only of everything. And that kind of makes you never forget the opportunities that you've been given and why you've been given them and what you ought to do with them.
So it's great that you touched on, in many of the rooms that you're in, sometimes you're the only Black person in that room. Once again, doing research on my dear friend, we find out that you got your bachelor's from Princeton. Mm-hmm. So you're a Tiger during undergrad, mm-hmm. and you're a Gator in law school,
right? I joined this little group when I was in college, so that was spring of '99. So that's when I became an Omega.
Listen, shout out to the good brothers at Omega Psi Phi Fraternity.
And that's why I got this nice jacket on, Jamal, because I came right from another event to record with you, but I still got my frat jacket on. But
I appreciate it. I have a lot of distinct love for the Divine Nine, but I love y'all, because y'all be out, y'all be in the streets, like, and that's never taking anything away.
It's from the messenger. Who are Black men going to listen to? Like other Black men. Mm-hmm. And so we have an enormous responsibility to be in the streets.
Yeah.
And to be having these real conversations and not to be putting on suits and doing just galas, which, some of our groups tend to do that more than real activism.
Shade. How often were you the only Black person in certain rooms during your time at Princeton? But what influence did you have being the only Black person?
What's interesting, at Princeton, I was very rarely the only Black person in the room because, there was a strong set of friends, like 10 of us, and 3 of us became Qs, 3 became Kappas or A. Like, we had a pretty vibrant Black community when I was there, and we all hung out together. And I mean, I had some white friends at Princeton, but I had more Black ones because we all hung out together. And so that I wasn't necessarily the only Black person in rooms a lot there, but certainly as you go throughout your career and the higher you go and the longer you are, it's very interesting of how that starts happening now. So chronology wise, I bet we'll get there. But like now, I'm very often the only Black person on some of these boards and rooms and discussions. And, Jamal, I used to bite my tongue more than I do now. But I started thinking, why am I here? Why does it matter if I'm the only Black person in the room if I'm not going to say nothing? And so anybody could be here if I'm just going to sit here and not say anything. And so sometimes it's awkward and sometimes I sound like I'm aggressive but that's not my problem. That's y'all's. And so I oftentimes it's an uncomfortable thing when you got to tell your friends that they're being ignorant or they're not thinking about stuff that they ought to be thinking about. That's easy to tell your enemies. When you're on a board full of friends and you have to say, so y'all just going to keep hiring white executive directors and not even think about something else, that becomes a very quiet conversation. And it gets awkward on the phone. But I just started thinking, why am I here if I'm not going to say that?
So how often was that conversation a thing as you moved 2016 into the space of being the state house rep for District 61 in the state of Florida? How often are those conversations, especially highlighting some of the legislation that went through during your tenure? How often were those conversations then?
Now, this is when you start getting in it because, my specialty happens to be insurance. And so that's kind of a weird specialty, right, for the Black man from Tampa to have. But that happened to be my specialty, which meant that I was in rooms with a lot of big time donors because it's insurance and banking. And I'm a lawyer. So I was in rooms sometimes where some of my colleagues were not, just because of the committees I got put on and because of the issues that I advocated for. So it was interesting sometimes. Listen, I happen to have personal relationships with some high-ranking Republicans back in the day. So not oftentimes, but sometimes I remember this. It was during March Madness, which around this time I got invited to watch the basketball game with the Republicans. And so it was me. I was the only Democrat there. Mm-hmm. And it was the speaker. It was the head of the budget committee. It was like super high-ranking guys. And, I'm sitting there drinking wine and smoking cigars. And I was like, what am I doing? So I stopped. I'm hanging out, so I'm chilling. And then one of them, we're talking about something, and he says, these damn tree-hugging hippies, da-da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, you understand, I'm right here. Y'all, you understand you invited a Democrat, and everyone started laughing. They were like, oh, man, we didn't even realize it because you're so. So some of those, that's interesting. And when it gets to be bipartisan and then you're in Republican rooms that Democrats aren't in, then you're in white rooms that Black people aren't in. And so it starts becoming all those kind of things. But it was back then, I'm talking like I'm old. It was just different, man. DeSantis wasn't the governor.
Yeah.
Rick Scott was the governor, and he wasn't great, but he wasn't Rick Scott. And those Republicans back then weren't great, but they weren't doing this DEI, anti-Black people to your face stuff. And so we were cordial. You could vote against somebody all day and maybe go have some whiskey with them at night.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's certainly when you start being one of few in certain rooms when you get into the Tallahassee experience.
Okay. So in dealing in those circles and dealing in those areas, what becomes when does the pushback start?
That's a really good question. So
Mm-hmm.
the legislature is all about horse trading. You give me this, I give you that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is it gets hard, right? So I never voted for the budget because I thought no matter what y'all did, it was inadequate. It was not enough money for schools, too much money for prisons, not enough tax. I always I didn't care what y'all, and I voted against the entire budget every time. And I was probably only one of 3 or 4 people that did that. Eventually, everyone votes for the budget because you get stuff in the budget. And so I voted no several times. And so we have a great program in this area, and it's about giving Black kids music and art introduction. And it has been shown statistically to have a tremendous effect on keeping kids out of trouble. Like 98% of the kids that are involved in this program don't get into trouble and go to college. And they have state funding. And they were getting threatened with a reduction in that funding. And so I went in and I went and saw the budget chair and I said, look, man, I've never asked you for anything. This means a lot to me. And we're friends. And he was like, Sean, you don't come in here and ask for a lot. Good.
Exactly.
So I get up to walk out and he says, but you're going to have to vote for the budget if I do this for you. I literally said, well, these little kids ain't gonna have no flutes because I am not voting for I'm not this because I wasn't willing to do that. The exchange I didn't think was fair. I didn't think that me voting for the budget was worth the appropriation there. They got it now because someone else did it and we worked it. But you start getting in places like that where it's hard to know what keeping it real is. It's hard to know what the best thing for your district is. And you start getting in these choices aren't easy sometimes. It's, you got people on both sides and you got to determine, what you're going to go home and tell your people and how you're going to make it good for them. So that's when you start having things like that. And Republicans come to you and say, if you do this, I'll do that. If it affected, but I will tell you this, I got stuff passed and signed into the law, and I don't think anybody would accuse me of being a friend of Rick Scott. But the way I did it was, if it didn't matter to my district, we could talk. So if this was an issue that wasn't a big issue in my district, mm-hmm. and it was really important to you, all right, I might give it to you, but I need my thing passed, that is how I kind of did my horse trading. But if it was my district and if it was about insurance or legal stuff, don't even come to me. Y'all, you're wasting your time. And so that's kind of how I got around, and I did okay. And when I was up there, but it's hard to know what's right.
I appreciate that example, the music and art example, because it highlights strongly just how much you have to at times play across the aisle in order to get things done for the betterment of your people and the people that you represent.
And listen, both decisions, if someone had taken the money and voted for the budget, that's the right decision too. Mm-hmm. Both of the decisions are right, I should say justifiable. I wouldn't call anyone out if they took the money and voted for the budget, or do what I did, not take the money to not vote against. Both of those are justifiable. It's just kind of.
But you have a personal moral value,
right,
of looking at the budget and saying, no, and then just, you're seeing these things that are in the budget. You're seeing these items that are in the budget, and just like, no, like, why are we doing this? Like,
that's exactly the reaction I used to have to my Democratic colleagues. What are y'all doing? Why are we voting? There's 2 people voting against it, and I'm one of them. So everybody here thinks this is good? All right. And it became like a running joke. Like everyone knew that I was going to vote against the budget. And it was just, there was a day where all we did was budget. And I mean, I'd go in the back and eat chicken fingers and I would just tell my seatmate, you know what to do. Vote no every time. And so but that was my belief and that was my moral point that I was making. But, other people have different points of view.
Which is incredible. So of that, what of that do you carry into 2018 when you start initially having the conversations and then the eventual choice of wanting to run for state attorney general?
Well, one, the legislature wasn't fun. All the things I'm describing to you, it wasn't fun. It's not fun to lose every vote. It's not fun to whatever decision you make, a bunch of people are going to like it, a bunch of people not going to like it. It's important, but I could tell it was wearing on me. And I've always thought attorney general is the best job in Florida. It's always been the dream job. It's always been the one I've wanted, even more than governor, because you can do so much without having to go to the legislature, without having to do stuff that even the governor has to do. I could just file a lawsuit tomorrow if I think it's what needs to be done. Mm-hmm. And I'm a lawyer. So it was always attractive to me. And, at first I'd only been in the House for a year when people started coming to me about it. And I was like, I'm not ready for this. I'm not doing this. I'm not going to do this. And I'll do it maybe in 4 years. And it just started, these things coalesce and they happen. And I started hearing that if I got in, there wouldn't be a primary. And I started hearing that, this was a year that Democrats thought might be good. I started hearing that maybe I would have political and financial support. I started, hearing all the right things. Mm-hmm. And I think after one particularly long session in the House, I think I called my political person. I was like, you know what? I'm in. Let's just do it. Let's just do it. And so I decided, really to the surprise of a lot of people close to me, I decided to give up the House and run for attorney general. And I've never looked back on that decision, even though I didn't win. That was the right decision to make at the time. And if you remember, 2018 was the Andrew Gillum year. So it was Gillum and I were going around the state, blackety black. It was a fun time. It didn't quite end up as we wanted. But in Florida politics, that's the closest. He and I came the closest people have ever come to the race to the offices we were running for. And so it was traveling up and down this state was just amazing, particularly, Jamal, the Black audiences that you would get in front of. Man, these people were so thankful, so happy, so excited. I would show up to places, Indian River County, and there'd be a group of 50 Black people there, so excited that you were there that they couldn't contain it. Or you go to a church in DeLand and these people, you'd be there 2 hours taking pictures. It was just amazing, man. The outpouring of that year, the organizing that was happening on the ground that year. And it was, national, it was national races. We were kind of national races that year. And what's interesting, Letitia James was running for Attorney General of New York at the same time. So I kind of know her a little bit. Okay. And I know one of your questions is going to be, well, what can an attorney general do? Go look at what Letitia James is doing. Mm-hmm. If you don't think that if I was the attorney general of Florida, that I would be doing the same thing in Florida, if not worse. Listen, that is exactly what was going to happen.
So no, that's a good segue. What is the purpose of the attorney general? I know we have an idea of what it is on the federal level. What is the purpose of the attorney general for the states, and particularly the state of Florida?
To go after bad people and to protect the citizens. That's a big pot. But examples are, the current attorney general is going to sue to keep that marijuana amendment off the ballot. The current attorney general allows the governor to do whatever he wants to do. Do you know how many legal cases the governor has lost once they go to a judge? Explain to me why the attorney general hasn't ever done anything to go after anything that he or the legislature has ever done. That's what the attorney general stands up to the legislature and stands up to federal stuff when they want, stands up for, the small guy, the little guy against these big corporate interests. That's what the attorney general is, the people's lawyer. It's not the general counsel for the Republican Party. It's not the general counsel for the legislature. It's not the general counsel for the governor. It is a separate office that should, be out there doing whatever is good for the people. And, the lady that beat me and that is the current attorney general just is a Trump, DeSantis, do whatever they want. Mm-hmm. And, an attorney general can do a lot of good or a lot of bad. Unfortunately, I think we've got one doing a lot of bad.
So I'm going to point something out right quick for everyone that is listening to this episode. Sean just nicely pointed out the fact that the current Attorney General Ashley Moody, the current Attorney General, is filing a lawsuit to attempt to keep the recreational marijuana amendment off of this year's ballot. I think that says it right there, the importance of who it is that you vote into office.
Fighting to keep abortion off the ballot.
And we've had two circumstances, 2018 with this nice gentleman here with the nice Omega jacket on, and 2022 with the awesome, incredible Aramis Ayala. We had two instances where this woman could have been kept out of office to not file lawsuits to keep bodily autonomy and the right and privilege to be able to have recreation.
Well, you mentioned returning citizens. When the legislature passes a bill that says you got to pay a poll tax before you get your rights back, there's only one person who can file a lawsuit on behalf of the state against that.
And that is the Attorney General.
And so you can sue the state and the legislature and the governor, and you can do all kinds of things that an average citizen can't do. So, it's a big job. It's an incredible job. I was, pumped. That was the easiest job to kind of get excited for and to run for. It's hard. Running statewide ain't fun. Mm-hmm. I tell people you wake up in a different city every day. You're never in your own bed, and it's exhausting, and you got to raise tens of millions of dollars. Like, it's hard, man. Running for statewide office is hard, but it was immensely rewarding. It was fun. It was fun traveling around the state and seeing all these people that knew my dad back in the day and then were meeting me, and so they were just happy to be helping me. And again, you'd show up someplace, and it would be standing room only, and you would think, who's coming? And Exactly. It was you. Like, they were coming to see you. And, I went to the Panhandle once, and there was some restaurant. And it was lines out the door like it was a club. And when I drove up, the guy that was driving me, I was like, what? Who else is coming? They're like, nobody. This is us. And as I walked in, it took me an hour to get to the stage because everyone it was so rewarding and so great, so humbling for all those reasons, man. I was really, those memories I'll never forget. It was a lot of good ones more than the bad ones.
And to point something out before we move to the next portion of this interview, when the recount situation occurred, correct me if I'm wrong, there were three statewide races that were very close to the point where recounts occurred. And one of those was yours.
No, mine was not. Mine was I lost by like 5 points. Andrew, of course, lost by less. No, 5 points is the closest anyone's come for attorney general ever. White, black, ever. And what's funny, my polls all said, if Andrew wins by, 4 or 5 points, you're going to win. And 7 of the 10 polls had Andrew winning by 4 points or more when we were near the end. Remember, Andrew was winning outright in 9 out of 10 polls, and it ended up coming short. So, near the end there, man, it was Kamala Harris was down here, Biden, Obama, like everybody was down here near the end of that 2018 race because it was that close. And Andrew, of course, was as talented as he was, and everyone was getting drawn to the race. But I was in the Dominican Republic already by the time the recount happened because I had gone on vacation. But what was interesting is there were a lot of ballots that had Bill Nelson's name filled in, my name blank, Andrew's name blank, and voting for Nikki Fried and on the way down. Now you tell me what Andrew and I have in common that would make people go blank.
Nah, we just gonna skip over that. For me, your race as well as Andrew's, your race as well as Andrew Gillum's is the main reason why I became so centrally focused, not on just wanting to do community and political organizing, period, but wanting to do it for the state of Florida. I was like, we had an opportunity to put 2 incredible Black men in because I knew the importance of state attorney general. We had the opportunity to put 2 incredible Black men in the highest offices in the state of Florida. And it was a great experience watching you all move and maneuver across the state and having a real concern about the people of Florida and the issues that were important to them, and also giving Black people hope and an opportunity to see themselves in the state political structure.
Yeah, that's what,
for Florida. Because
that's what was so humbling, is that's exactly what it was. People could see that you were Black, normal, that you represented them, that you understood what you represented. You need to sometimes understand what is the reason people see themselves in you. You can't just ignore the fact that you're Black and running for these seats. Like, you have to understand what it means to people. And it was, like I said, near the end there, if you went to a Black community, or me and Andrew, it was on and popping if you were in a Black community there near the end. But I also don't want to just limit it to that. We had tremendous support from our the white community.
Y'all did.
I mean, we won the nominations. We didn't win the Black nominations for those races. We won the Democratic nominations, and we were the first Black nominees for those offices ever. And so we won those with a tremendous amount of support from a lot of people across the state. And the biggest event I went to that was just for me was in the Villages. The Villages. I mean, it was like 1,000 people in the room. But it was, like I said, it was humbling. And to your point, I think a lot of people thought, well, man, 2018, it was so close. Next time. But the problem is 2018 ended up being a high point and not a trend, right? It was like zoop and then boom. And that's what's been so disappointing. We thought that, well, next time we're going to get over the hump because this was so close. And unfortunately, that's the closest we have come in a very long time. And we just got to keep at it.
So you've now decided to bypass state politics, and this year enter into the realm of municipal politics by being a candidate for District 6 of Hillsborough County Commission. Discuss the importance of municipal politics as a whole, and why is it important for you to step into municipal politics in the area that you live in of Hillsborough County?
Yeah. Listen, I'm not saying I'll never run for state office again, but right now, this county commission race is one that, at least in my county, is super important. And it's, we've never had a Black person elected countywide. And we've never had two Black people on the county commission at the same time. And so if I were to win, both of those things would be first. So that's, important. But, what's more important is these local municipal races, and that's county commission, that's city council, that's school board. They affect your daily lives more than any of these other races we've been talking about. More than attorney general, more than state rep. These every day, when's your trash get picked up? Why is the traffic so bad? What are they teaching my kid in the school? What kind of ordinances do I have for businesses in Ybor City? All these things that affect your life. Where's the new development in the county happening? Buses, do I have money to, is the bus system adequately funded? All of these decisions are these local municipal races. And so it's super important for your everyday life, the things that matter to you. Why are these potholes not getting fixed? I mean, it's small things, but it's every day. It's what's affecting you. When you turn on your faucet, does water come out, and does it come out at the right pressure? That's all. These are municipal things. And is it clean? And so what drew me to it is, one, the impact on everyday things. But Jamal, I kind of alluded to it. I'm tired of partisan fights right now. Like I'm kind of tired of the go to Tallahassee and yell and scream and be on the Florida channel, lose the vote and come home.
Right.
And so I wanted to be somewhere where I could do some solutions, or I got into politics to help people ultimately. And I wanted to be somewhere where I thought that I could make that difference. There's 7 people on the county commission. All you need are 3 other people to vote for you, and you're getting something done. And, whether it's just building a road is helping somebody. Helping a school to get built somewhere is helping somebody. Making sure that, a bus system gets this person from here to a job they want, that helps somebody. And that is what is attractive to me at this point in my career. And in a county, some of these counties like Miami-Dade, Hillsborough, Orange, these county commission seats are giant because you represent a lot of people. And the whole county of Hillsborough, that's a lot of people that you would represent. And so you have a lot of ability to do some good.
And what makes you the right choice come November?
Well, one, I know the issues, right? And I've got the experience in government to do it. But one, I care about the people. In my entire career, you can look at it and see kind of where I've approached, where my politics comes from. Like, what's my driving motivation to be in politics? After I lost the attorney general race, I didn't disappear. I am very involved in the community. I'm very involved not only in statewide politics, but local politics here. I do all kinds of things on the local level, helping the NAACP, helping public schools, helping transit commissions, a bunch of things like that. So I'm very involved and very knowledgeable on these local issues. But I also think we need louder advocates on the county commission. It's one thing to have someone that votes right with you. It's another thing to have someone that not only is going to vote with you, but it's going to be loud about it and is going to champion your issues, and is going to be someone that you can depend on to push back when the other side does something that's wrong. And so we've got another side that is doing, their solution to everything in Hillsborough County is to build more roads. And so that's not the solution. That's not what I think. I think we got to build a lot of infrastructure and do a lot of things to transit and all these other things, keep cars off the road and give people options, buses, trains, those sorts of things. But I've always been someone, I didn't run for office just to sit in the back row and vote like I'm supposed to vote and go home. Like, I came to be loud. I came to represent my people, and I came to be a champion. And that's what I would do on the county commission. So, and I think I'm the best poised to do that.
And for me, I think that's the common denominator for what we call our first half of the season for this podcast. We call it the Elite Eight, which is the 8 guests that we'll be having who have been an influence over the start of this podcast, the start of this BLKFLA movement, or just been very influential over Black political organizing in the state of Florida as a whole. I think that's the common denominator for all of y'all, is wanting to be loud, right, and justifiable in why you are loud and right. You can be loud. You can be.
There's a lot of people loud and wrong, right?
Mm-hmm. You can be loud, but you can not be justifiable in why you are being loud, because you are wrong in every piece that you are doing.
So I'm running countywide now, which is not just Black folks; it's the whole county. But when I was in the state house, I represented mainly Black people, and I always tell people that represent minority districts or that are heads of organizations, NAACP, urban leagues, Divine Nines. If you are representing Black folks and you're not loud, you ain't doing it right. There's absolutely no way that you could be effectively representing people that have so much stacked against them and so much need, and you quiet about it. The NAACP chair here in Hillsborough County, like, it's famous. I've told her, I don't want my NAACP chair getting along with everybody. Like, I don't want you to be the mayor's favorite person. You're not supposed to be. You're the NAACP president. You're supposed to have people revved up, and you're supposed to have some rough edges. You're supposed to ruffle some feathers. That's what the job entails. And if you get invited into every gala in Tampa, I don't think you're doing this right as the NAACP president. So I've always kind of advocated for this loud and aggressive advocacy, particularly if you represent Black folks, because I think it's required.
Last question, which is always going to be the last question that we give all of our guests on this podcast. Sean Shaw, what is your vision of a Florida where Black people are able to live in freedom, equity, and authenticity?
Well, it's different than what we got now. So I don't know. I'll start there, but we got to win these elections, man. Losing 20 years of elections is what got us here. It has gotten progressively nastier and nastier for Black people, but losing so many years is what got us to where we are right now, which is the frontal attack on Black people and their interests, no longer the underground attack. But, Jamal, that requires us to not just complain about DeSantis and the people doing this to us. It requires work. It requires involvement. All of us can do something. All of us aren't running for office. All of us aren't activists on the ground. All of us aren't donors, but all of us can do something rather than get on Twitter and complain. I get so sick. I have a radio show and people call in and say, well, I don't see the Urban League doing anything in the community. Why ain't the NAACP doing more to do blah, blah, blah? What do you do? But tell me what your activity is in the community to make it better rather than just a bunch of complaining. We have to do work, and we've got to do consistent work. And a lot of that is in the political realm. And those of us that understand the importance of politics have to convince everyone else about the importance of politics. And just because you don't love Democrats or Republicans does not mean you don't need to be voting. Everyone has to be participating in the process, and then we can try to convince you which side is better. So I think it starts there, and it obviously is electing people who understand that just because I say Black Lives Matter doesn't mean I'm saying white lives don't matter, and understand that the promotion of Black interests isn't at the expense of other folks, and that a lot of times Black people want the same thing that everybody else wants: a good job, upward mobility, a safe neighborhood, all these same things that if you gave us that, you'd be giving everyone else that, and Florida would be a better place. And so I think that we've got a long road to go, but you got to start with work on the ground. And it's there. I mean, look what happened in Georgia, how fast it happened. Like Absolutely. Georgia, like that, not like that, but 10 years. Georgia went from damn near what we got to 2 Democratic U.S. senators and almost a governor in Stacey Abrams. So it's possible, and Florida is diverse, and we are a state of immigrants, and we are a state that is usually a little bit more moderate, but we sure got to put in some work, and you and I got to put in a lot of work to convince our people of why continued work in the realm of politics is necessary, and we got to do a lot of work on our Black men to convince them that we need them to be involved as well, and to stop this Trump shit.
and I think with you on the ground, being as present and being as accountable for a lot of things that you are, I think we headed in the right direction. Good brother, I appreciate you so much.
I appreciate you for doing this, and I appreciate all the work you do on the ground. It's not easy organizing us, Jamal. I know that. I know it ain't easy organizing us, and so I thank for what you do on the ground. And sometimes it doesn't get recognition. Sometimes it only gets blame, and it doesn't get you in the paper, and it doesn't get headlines. But I know that ain't why you're doing it. I know you're doing it for the right reasons. So that's why I've always been a fan of yours, man. So please keep it up.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you, and thank you for coming by on this episode. So once again, this is Jamal Steele showing y'all love and appreciation for joining us on this BLKFLA experience. Stay free, stay blessed, and continue to get acquainted with greatness. We'll see you all next time.
If revolution was a movie, I'd be theme music. Time to ignite what I spit is light of fluid. Stepping into a fixed way, such a glorious design. Marching into the biggest fight of our lives. Time to spoil the revolution.